Order, order. Question is Secretary of State for Wales. We start with Scott Benton.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 1 and 2 together. My honourable friend, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary, and I have regular discussion with ministerial colleagues about cross-border connectivity and the Union Connectivity Review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the castles of North Wales to the Pleasure Beach in my own constituency, popular tourist attractions across North Wales and the northwest of England will host thousands of visitors this summer as people choose to holiday here in the UK rather than abroad. In order to support tourism and economic growth, it is vital that we strengthen transport links between both of those regions. And so would my right honourable friend agree with me that delivering on our manifesto pledge to upgrade the notoriously congested A55 must remain an absolute priority?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for raising that question. The answer is right. I visited the area myself quite a bit recently and seen exactly the challenges ahead. It is a manifesto commitment. We visited with the Transport Secretary. It's very much in our sights, and we hope to have some good news about that in the foreseeable future.
Right, Marco Longi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my Italian forefathers always understood the importance of sunshine, sandy beaches, and full-bodied, gorgeous ice cream. But if you live in Dudley, the nearest beach is in Wales, and access is almost mission impossible. What can my right honourable friend do to improve the well-being of my constituents by improving access to these basic rights?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, we can't move Dudley, but what we can do is progress the Union Connectivity Review and strengthen the links. And I know very well his part of the world, and of course the cross-border holidaying and other activity between the West Midlands and Wales is well known, and we want to improve it. And that's exactly what the review is about, because we know it not only brings sort of gratification to the residents of Dudley, but also economic prosperity to both areas.
First of 2 questions, Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr, Iwerydd. The Wales Government Centre has calculated that were Wales to be treated like Scotland in relation to HS2 and rail funding, we'd be over £500 million better off. Only 1.26% of the firms in the HS2 supply chain are Welsh, and we know that when HS2 is complete, it will take £200 million out of the South Wales economy alone. What percentage of the HS2 supply chain firms should be based in Wales, in his opinion? Or is he happy for his government to continue to shortchange Wales?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad the Honourable Lady has recognised the relevance of HS2 in terms of shortening journey times. Indeed, from her own constituency to London will benefit from the improvements which we're recommending and which are included in the recent Queen's speech, for that matter. There will be shorter journey time, but also there will be numerous opportunities for businesses in Wales to be part of the supply chain, not only in the construction period, but thereafter as well. So I hope what she's actually asked is, or pointed out, is how her party and her area are actually going to warmly embrace what's a major infrastructure scheme which will benefit Wales in whichever part of it you live.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Percentage would be nice, but I think an increase would be most welcome, seeing as the effect it will have. But in another area, Welsh language TV channel S4C has seen 36% real-term cuts since 2010, and there are now concerns it will receive a flat cash settlement in the next licence fee round. S4C only requires a modest £10 million per annum of additional investment and retention of CPI-linked annual increases in licence fee funding in order to remain competitive with the already advantaged BBC and, essentially, to reach audiences on new digital platforms. Will he work with DCMS to ensure additional investment for S4C so the channel is treated with equivalence to the BBC and, equally or more important, that it is viable into the future?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady raising these for cultural and linguistic significance of S4C, not least because it's headquartered in my own constituency, in fact. So I have a very sort of warm relationship with all of the individuals who've been making their case very powerfully to members across the House around the last few months. I can confirm to her that, yes, of course, the Wales office has made some very strong submissions to DCMS. The decision is yet to be made, but I urge her and and other colleagues to continue to do that, because we do recognise the importance of this and we want to very much get to a speedy and correct conclusion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. One of the ways in which the Government could improve transport connectivity is to figure out what it's doing with its much-lauded Levelling Up Fund. Given the performance of the Bays and local government ministers yesterday at the Bays Select Committee, which can be described as confused at best, not knowing how the fund will work, how it will be delivered and whether or not funding will continue into levels 2 and 3, could the Secretary of State confirm that there will be funding available for the second and third funding bids, and it will be at the same level as promised by ministers just at the beginning of this year? And will he also commit to a further meeting with all Welsh MPs of all parties with CLG officials so that they can clarify the confusing state for those members who have more than one county in their constituencies, so the constituents don't lose out on this much promised money?
That's right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, as far as meetings are concerned, more than happy to confirm that we will put those in the diary, whether it's with MHCLG or others, is a matter for discussion. Very happy to do that, as we have done on a number of issues, actually, and I found that to be quite a constructive and collaborative experience. As far as the Levelling Up Fund is concerned, this is, at the end of the day, a good news story. I recognise that there are lessons to be learned from year one, but the Levelling Up Fund, in whatever shape or form we like to describe it, is here to stay, and I'm very keen to hear the lessons from the Honourable Member and indeed local authorities and other stakeholders as to how we can make it even better than it already is in years 2 and 3.
Answer your question to the Secretary of State from Matt West.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer questions 6, 7 and 8 together. The House only needs to look at the 16 million recently given to Meritor in Cwmbran, or the 30 million given to Selsa at the beginning of the pandemic to see our commitment to Welsh manufacturing. The Government has provided over £11.35 billion in direct and indirect support for businesses in Wales to tackle the pandemic.
Let's go to Matt Weston. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The news in recent days that the Serious Fraud Office has launched an investigation into Liberty Steel will be really concerning for workers in Newport and Tredegar and all of us who want to see a rescue deal. However, given that global steel production is actually increasing, the industry can clearly be viable, and it is, of course, critical to our supply chain infrastructure for so many industries. Can I therefore urge the Government to come forward in the next few days with a clear plan and confirm that it will do whatever it takes, including the option of public ownership, to secure UK domestic steel capacity and the jobs they support, including in my constituency of Warwick and Leamington?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm sure the Honourable Member will understand if I don't get drawn into any questions about liberty, particularly given the case that he mentions. But I hope he will be reassured by the fact that my earlier reference to Selsa, where we were able to step in at short notice and help a company for exactly the reasons that he rightly points out, is a demonstration of exactly how committed we are to a sustainable steel industry in Wales.
Tamjid Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, way back in 2012, in the good old days, the Conservative-led government promised to build a Western rail link to Heathrow, which would not only benefit my Slough constituents, but the many Welsh businesses and families who would have a shorter, more direct route to our major national transport hub. So can the Secretary of State tell us, when can we finally expect work to begin on that line? And can he also guarantee that Welsh and other UK steel manufacturers will be at the front of the queue when this line is being built?
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would be a beneficiary of that line, so I'm with him in terms of our ambition to always try to improve on our infrastructure links. It's good for the economy. It's particularly good for the supply chain economy, as he rightly points out. There would be plenty of businesses in Wales which could benefit from that. And, of course, the recent announcements in the Queen's speech around procurement, I hope will give him and others encouragement that we're taking that extremely seriously.
Let's go to Mick Whitley. Mick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. North Wales is part of an integrated cross-border economy that stretches from Wrexham and Flintshire to my constituency on the banks of the Mersey. COVID-19 has devastated key local manufacturers across this area, including the Vauxhall car plant in Ellesmere Port and many companies located in the Deeside Enterprise Zone. Can the Secretary of State inform the House what steps the Government is taking to expedite the proposed Mersey-Dee Alliance fiscal stimulus package? which will help manufacturers across North East Wales and the Wirral build back better and greener in the wake of this terrible pandemic.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I hope I can give the honourable gentleman some encouragement. We are enthusiastic about the Mersey-Dee Alliance and everything that it stands for. We're keen to continue working with them, looking at ways of recognising that the economic area stretches way beyond the geographical borders of Wales and England, so we absolutely recognise that point, and are determined to make sure that we get further progress and deliver on some of those commitments which we made around manufacturing and the other industries in Deeside that he referred to.
Let's go to Dr. Jamie Wallace. Jamie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Port Talbot and Bridgend area could lend itself fantastically towards the establishment of the UK Government's first free port in Wales, creating up to 15,000 jobs in the process. Does my right honourable friend have an update on this initiative in Wales, and can he confirm if the UK Government will start this free port process alone if the Welsh Government continues to ignore this fantastic opportunity?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is right to point out how enthusiastically the Freeport scheme has been welcomed across the whole of Wales, in fact, and it is a source of some frustration that we have yet to get it over the line. He's right to ask the question as whether we could do that. Now, very clearly, we would like to do that in collaboration with Welsh Government, which is where the blockage currently resides. But we can, and if necessary, we will proceed to deliver on a manifesto commitment come what may.
Shadow Minister Arnold Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Trade agreements with other countries can provide new opportunities to promote our excellent Welsh manufacturers around the world, but we must make sure that these deals do not end up undercutting our own industries in the process. The Welsh Automotive Forum has said that current trading arrangements between the UK and Europe are leading to disruption to Welsh companies due to new checks on imports and rules of origin, and I've heard this from local companies in Merthyr Tydfil and Rumney too. So what has the Secretary of State done personally to address this, and what will he guarantee that Welsh agricultural producers do not lose out from the proposed deal with Australia?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As far as the issues that he raises in the automotive sector is concerned, we have regular meetings with that sector. We have regular meetings with stakeholders, supply chain and others to try and ascertain exactly what the issues are and how they can be speedily resolved. So we're engaged on that level. As far as the rumours around the Australia FTA, I should point out to him, of course, that no deal has been done, but if and when it is done, it will include protections for the agricultural industry, will not undercut UK farmers or compromise our high standards.
Alex Davies-Jones.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last year, the Government has provided £7.4 billion of additional support through the welfare system for people affected by COVID-19, including the £20 per week increase in universal credit. I have regular discussions with my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, about financial support for Wales, and I was able to personally congratulate him a few weeks ago on the outstanding budget that he delivered for Wales and the UK.
Mr. Speaker, but more than a year has now passed since the excluded UK was first mentioned in this place, and still nothing has been done to support the millions of people across the UK who have seen their livelihoods decimated by the pandemic but have not received a penny of support from this UK Government. So the Secretary of State mentions, and the Minister mentions, they have met with the Chancellor, but what representations have they made to the Chancellor on behalf of Welsh people who have been excluded from support by his own government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the £7.4 billion of additional support through the welfare system, of course, the UK Government provided the Welsh Government with an extra £8.6 billion worth of support, and the Welsh Government were free to use that in any way they wish. They were free to give it out to local authorities and allow local authorities to make grants to anyone who had been badly affected. So we completely acknowledge that people have suffered as a result of the pandemic. That's why there was £8.6 billion of support for Welsh Government, why Welsh businesses received £2.75 billion of support, and why we supported 466,000 Welsh workers through the furlough scheme.
The Secretary of State.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Well, families across Wales would have appreciated the recent easing of COVID restrictions, made possible, of course, by First Minister Mark Drakeford's cautious, evidence-driven approach. But rising concerns about new variants of coronavirus remind us that the pandemic has not gone away. Now, the vast majority of people want to play their part to keep us all safe, but the UK Government's failure to increase statutory sick pay is forcing many on low incomes to choose between going to work to support their families or staying at home to keep us safe. So what pressure can the Minister bring to bear on the Chancellor to put this right?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm sure the Honourable, possibly Right Honourable Lady, would acknowledge that Mr Drakeford has been able to work very closely with the UK Government because he's been present at all of the COBRA meetings and Welsh Government ministers have been present at all the ministerial implementation group meetings, very much part of a joint approach towards tackling this pandemic. The Chancellor and Prime Minister have always been clear that people are going to suffer as a result of this pandemic. We haven't been able to help everyone, but we have, as I've already said, provided an extra £8.6 billion to the Welsh Government, £2.75 billion for Welsh businesses, 466,000 Welsh workers supported on furlough, plus the mortgage holidays, the cuts in VAT, the cuts in business rates, and in Wales alone, we've already created 5,000 extra jobs through the Kickstart scheme.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Well, on a different matter, without delving into the chaos of this government's foreign travel policy, the reality for many airlines will be that this summer will be nowhere near a return to normal, with the whole aviation sector facing irreparable harm. We've already seen Welsh jobs lost in this sector, and Aerospace Wales has warned of thousands of more jobs are on the line. So what sector-specific financial support will the Minister's government provide to the aviation industry in Wales to get it through yet another difficult summer and ensure that it has a strong future?
Well, Mr Speaker, can I first of all welcome very much the Honourable Lady's support for the airline industry and for her stated view that we should get people back into planes and flying around as much as we possibly can. And it's in stark contrast to some of the some people in her party who seem to take an extreme environmental view that nobody should ever go into a plane. So I very much welcome that support for the airline industry. I can assure the Honourable Lady that we meet with the airline industry on a regular basis. I've spoken to the Space Aerospace Trade Body about 10 days ago. I met with Airbus online a few days ago. We haven't taken up a sector-specific support because this UK Government believes that we should be able to go out there and help all businesses that have been affected by this pandemic, and that's why, as I said, we've already put out that £2.75 billion for Welsh businesses, and I hope she would welcome that.
Research by the Centre for Progressive Policy has shown that UK Government COVID emergency support was on average £1,000 more generous to London residents than to those in Wales, and that the UK Government spent nearly £7 billion more on London than it otherwise would have done if each nation and region of the UK had been allocated the same amount of emergency spending per resident. What explanation has the Minister been given by Cabinet colleagues for this discrepancy?
Well, Mr Speaker, the fact of the matter is that the money has gone to those in need in all parts of the United Kingdom. I've already mentioned the £8.75 billion extra that went to the Welsh Government and the £2.7 billion for Welsh businesses and the 466,000 Welsh workers who were supported through the furlough scheme. And to be honest with you, I really welcome these questions because they give me an opportunity to spell out the huge amount of support that the Government's delivered for Wales. But on a UK-wide basis, UK-wide, the UK Government has spent £280 billion supporting people from across the whole of the United Kingdom. With the greatest respect to the honourable gentleman, I don't think an independent Wales would have been able to manage that level of support.
Mr Speaker.
John.
Mr Speaker, last week's Queen's speech announced legislation on procurement which will increase flexibility for contracting authorities and reduce bureaucracy, and this will simplify procurement in the public sector and help support Welsh businesses. I very much hope the Welsh Government will join us in further supporting Welsh companies.
The Minister will be aware that the Department of Transport are spending billions on their programme to decarbonise transport, but they don't seem so interested in building our green manufacturing capacity. So does he share my concern at recent reports of Welsh councils buying green buses not from British firms but from China? So will he hold urgent discussions with councils, government and with the Transport Secretary in London to demand taxpayer-funded green subsidies support British industry and British jobs?
Minister.
Well, first of all, Mr Speaker, I'm absolutely delighted that the honourable gentleman has recognised and said in his question that this government is spending billions of pounds supporting green industries. He's absolutely right in that. Now, I don't know which specific councils he means. I know that Newport Labour Council recently bought some electric buses. I've no idea where they bought them from, but if he has a problem with the way in which Newport Labour Council are conducting procurement, then perhaps he'd like to discuss it with some of his Labour colleagues. The honourable gentleman will certainly know that we do, of course, have to abide by the WTO treaty agreement, and I don't suppose he's advising me to break our international treaty obligations. But if he is, I look forward to hearing more about it.
Number 16, sir. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the results of the recent election clearly showed that a majority of voters in Wales and in Scotland, actually, voted for pro-unionist parties. It is clear that voters in Wales want the freedom to be able to study, to work, to live, to travel freely between England and Wales without a border.
Sir Edward, apart from evident self-interest, will my honourable friend agree that the Union, following these elections, is ever stronger because of abundant common interest? Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has been in this House for many years and has a great deal of wisdom. And he makes an important point. We are united by a shared love of the Union, our United Kingdom, and the firm belief that we are stronger together than apart.
If somebody wants to do a little tapping, there is room outside for that. Let's go now to a substantive question for Minister Davies again.
Mr. Speaker, this fiscal settlement delivers for Wales. This year, the Welsh Government will receive almost £19 billion of block grant funding, which is £1 billion more than was agreed with the Welsh Labour Government as being a fair settlement for Wales.
Let's go to Deirdre, bro. Deirdre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fiscal settlement, of course, won't matter all that much if the possible trade deal with Australia goes through with a zero-tariff regime, which would cause serious difficulties for Welsh and indeed Scottish farmers. What compensation for those farmers is being built into the fiscal settlement should this latest gung-ho trade deal scupper their livelihoods?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, no trade deal has been signed yet, but I was on a call with the NFU yesterday who actually said that they welcomed the principle of a trade deal, and they have a few concerns about some of the details, and we will continue our discussions with the NFU and with farmers. But I'm surprised the Honourable Lady, I think, was in favour of having a free trade deal with the European Union. Why would she not want to have a free trade deal with a country with which we all, Mr. Speaker, she and I, in fact, personally, have very close links indeed? Thank you.
John Howell.
Number 18, sir.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senedd election has shown that 3 out of 4 voters rejected separatism, recognising that there are economic prosperities indelibly linked to being part of the Union.
John Howell.
Thank you. I am concerned that one of the first priorities of the Welsh Government seems to be a universal basic income. Is my right honourable friend aware of the debate that I took part in at the Council of Europe, in which we discussed all of this and which the idea was completely rubbished?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, anybody who thinks this is a good idea should knock some doors of voters in working families. It might sound radical to academics and policy wonks, but it sounds out of touch if you ask most normal people. Mr. Speaker, those aren't in fact my words. Those are the words of the new economy minister in Welsh Government. So it seems to me that they've got a problem in their own ranks, let alone trying to persuade us of the merits of it.
Let's go to Christina Rees. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State accept that it's Mark Drakeford's superb stewardship of the Welsh economy and Welsh NHS that secured Mark's overwhelming re-election? Will he welcome the Welsh Labour Government's new 10-year infrastructure investment plan for a zero-carbon economy and release the promised UK Government funding for the Global Centre of Rail Excellence to be built in my Neath constituency?
Mr. Speaker, many questions included in that, but I'm delighted to have played a part in getting the Global Centre of Rail Excellence situated in her constituency. That was a government announcement by the Chancellor in the budget. So it shows that actually collaboration can work when we try to achieve those aims. And certainly as far as COVID reaction is concerned, that has been a team effort. It has been a cross-UK effort. And the vaccination programme is probably the clearest indication of of why the union matters and how we've been able to work collaboratively with our colleagues in Welsh Government to deliver something which is genuinely benefited the entire nation.
Stephen Crabb. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The recent elections did demonstrate that the... Oh, beg your pardon. Question number 20.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend the Prime Minister spoke to the First Minister shortly following the election result. I have extended an invitation to meet the new Minister for the Economy. We've had calls with the First Minister and CDL last week and another one due this evening.
Stephen Crabb. Apologies, Mr. Speaker. I'm out of practice. Mr. Speaker, the recent elections demonstrated that the vast majority of voters in Wales have no time for independence. They have little time for ripping up the devolution settlement either. What I think they showed is that they want the politicians and ministers at either end of the M4 to work together to make good things happen for Wales, to make Wales a stronger, more prosperous part of the UK. Given that the success of the vaccination programme shows that it can be done, what needs to happen now to unblock other important policies like free ports, which are stuck between UK and Welsh Government?
Secretary of State. Well, my honourable friend is absolutely spot on. We've had considerable interest, really enthusiastic interest in the Freeport programme from across the whole of Wales. It will bring 15,000 jobs. It's a manifesto commitment. The only obstacle standing between us and delivering it is currently Welsh Government. So I'm determined to work collaboratively, as we've said before, to get this over the line, and any pressure that anybody in this House can bring to bear to help us achieve that will be very welcome.
We're now moving to questions to the Prime Minister, and we're now going to start